Do you want to know what's one of the most devastating questions you can ask someone who you think is underperforming? This was something that was asked of me many, many years ago by Chef Mark McEwen. If you don't know Mark McEwen, if you're Canadian, you probably know him from the restaurants he had, the Food Network shows, Top Chef Canada. In the 80s and 90s, he was like one of the kings in the culinary scene. And I worked for him. A little intimidating. Drove a Porsche, I believe. Anyway, I was working in one of his restaurants, and one of the things I had to do was we had a display case, and I would put out all like delicious little salads and foods and meats and all fish, all that kind of stuff, and people can take away their stuff home. This is back in the day. This wasn't very popular. This wasn't very common, I mean. So I had seared some scallops, and I was plating them up on a nice dish, and he had come by to just take a look at the counter. And he was kind of doing his thing. And here's the thing. No news is good news, right? In the chefy world, no news is good news. And he was very quiet, so I'm like, and then he started looking at the scallops, and I was like, And this is when he dropped that question. He looked the scallops up and down. He looked at me. He goes, "Are you happy with that?" Now, if you don't know, okay, here's the thing. When someone asks you that, you're done. You're done. And I've used this question too. Because here's the thing. It's a no-win question. Because if I say, "Yes, chef, I love it. It's the best," he's going to just absolutely demolish you. He's going to say this, and this was like, you're done. You're cooked. If you say no, you're also done, because it's like, well, why the hell did you put that out if you're not happy with it? That's probably the worst answer you can give. Now, there are some people who would have said yes and that they were happy with it and then defended it to the last, tooth and nail, and with zero self-awareness. And there are people, no matter what evidence you put in front of them, no matter how much you show them their shortcomings or what the situation they're in, whatever it is, there are people who refuse to see it, right? And that, of course, is called denial. Now, I may not have had any denial of my lack of skills at that moment with Chef McEwen, but I certainly had oodles of denial in other areas of my life. My name is Paul Silva. The podcast is Seared, Stories from the Stove. And in this episode, I'm going to share more about denial, instances of denial, including, of my own alcohol addiction, and what you can do to move past denial so that you can live life with less anxiety, less isolation, and with more freedom and connection. So hang tight. Welcome. Oh, glad you're here. As always, hope you have a beverage of some sort, maybe some blueberry pie. We had Easter here, so maybe you still have some little chocolates. Speaking of Easter, we normally go to my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law's place. And we were there. I had my post-lunch nap, as usual. But we started watching, my youngest put on Gordon Ramsay, the Kitchen Nightmares. I haven't seen that show in ages, probably like 15 years. Like whenever it was new, that was when I was watching them. And I didn't realize he had other ones, like he had Hotel Hell. Anyway, he had all the, and we started just watching. It was like a little mini marathon. And there was one episode where he was in a restaurant, and of course, he always gets pushback, either by the owners or whoever, the chef. And this woman was co-owner, or she was a general manager, but she was doing everything. Anyway, I'm not going to get in details, but it was one of the most intense screaming matches they ever had. And the one thing he kept saying to her was, "You're in denial. You're in denial." He was showing her everything that was absolutely wrong. He had the staff tell her what was wrong, and she refused to see. Like, she's just like completely blindfolded. And that's what sparked, frankly, that's the sparked idea for this podcast episode. And it was interesting to watch how, in spite of all the overwhelming evidence, she continued to push her narrative, the facade, the story that her ego wanted to stick with. and try to change everything and blame everyone so that she can stick with that story and not look foolish or whatever it is that she feared. And boy, oh boy, as I was watching that, I was like, oh, I know a lot of people like this. And they weren't necessarily like GMs or owners or anything like that. You know, like for the one person that popped in my mind was, he was like just a cook, one of the cooks. He was lower ranked cooks at one of the places I worked. And he had a mouth on him. Just saying how great he was, and just all ego, just spewing forth ego and no self-awareness, zero self-awareness. And there was tons of denial. I would show him on a regular basis where he needed to work, what things he needed to work on. And he'd be floundering, and he's still blaming everyone else and victim and all, just pure denial, 100%. I mean, talk about a kitchen nightmare. You know, I had him and someone else that has issues too. And he just couldn't see how awful he was. Like he was in the wrong profession. It was just one of those guys. And just couldn't get through to him. And we got into a lot of altercations. It was like Gordon Ramsay and the other, we got into some screaming matches. And, you know, likewise, I worked with one manager in particular, a sous chef, and he too had that same thing. In spite of all the evidence we would show him about things that needed to be worked on and where he was and all that, there was still a lot of denial and a lot of finger pointing and just self-inflating that happened. And that, when that happens, that has a ripple effect, not only to the other staff, but it's also for their own, you know, they're stagnant in their growth. And it's rampant in the culinary scene, right? There's like so many people who overestimate their skills and refuse to see where they can change. And it's an industry, as I'm sure you know, ripe with ego and machismo and oodles of denial, which is, you know, one of the most basic ego defenses. You know, and when I look at these people, and listen, when I say these people, I was one of them for sure. You see there's a struggle. You see there's like a battle in their minds because part of them may know that what is being said is true, but there's that defense, that the wall just comes up and they just won't look past that. And, you know, if you think about denial, you know, in terms of a definition or how I see it it's just the simple refusal to admit to certain unacceptable or unmanageable aspects of reality, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Like, you know, I say, like, you can show people the receipts, but they'll still say they never shopped there, right? And not only I would talk about the kitchen because obviously this is what we do here. But you see this in relationships that are failing. You see this people with declining health. You see this with finances. And of course, we see this in areas of grief, mental health issues, abuse, trauma, and of course, one of the big ones, addiction. And addiction is where I can say most of my denial lived. I could go on for a long time here about how much I just how many walls I put up and refusing, again, even the overwhelming evidence shown to me, I absolutely refused to accept it. And I'll explain why in a second. There's reasons why we do this. But at one point I did realize that I was an alcoholic. There was it was just that point, like, boing. It's like, here, Paul, here's a slap of truth. And you're gonna have to suck it up, Buttercup. And, you know, once I had that awareness, it was hard because I couldn't unring that bell. And that made drinking even harder because I no longer had, you know, the ignorance is bliss kind of thing going on. I mean, I still drank for some time, but it was even less pleasurable than it already was. Like the party had long been done. I was still in the back, just chugging along, literally glug glug. And in many ways, I was happy that I had that crack in the ego, right? Leonard Cohen, everyone I know overquotes this, but that's where the light comes in. And as soon as I start to have those little fissures, those little cracks in the ego, that's truly where awareness came in. I could even say so far, spirit came in. In lieu of all my spirits, drinky drink. It was that moment of realization, right? It's in those moments when the wall comes down, the moments where you no longer can deny the tap dancing, like pregnant yak in the room. And those moments, those are like the germs, the seeds of growth, right? That's where they're seeded. And it's different for everyone, right? Denial breakthroughs, take two forms. It either happens when it needs to happen or it doesn't happen at all. And when it doesn't happen, which is common for most of us in different areas of our lives, we miss out on the life that reveals itself on the other side of that denial, right? Denial is a way for us to shield ourselves from some harsh truths. It often means that you're struggling to accept something that seems overwhelming or stressful. But it's to be said, in the short term, it can have a useful purpose. Just like any defense that we have has a purpose, at least at the beginning. With denial, it can buy you some time to adjust to a sudden change in your reality, right? It's like giving you that extra space, that buffer, so that you might be able to accept and adapt and eventually move on. For some of the cooks I mentioned, it allowed them to be in the place where they didn't have to look at themselves in the mirror and realize there was work to be done. And we all do this, of course. We all of us do this. But for some, and I include myself, I'm waving my hand here, it needs to get really bad before anything changes, which is where it was when it came to my drinking and how I was living my life. The reality is I was believing my own lies, hardcore. I thought, there was a point where I didn't believe that people didn't leave the house without having altered themselves in some ways. Like if you put on a lie detector during that time, I would have said, no, there's no way people leave the house sober, because it was against my own reality. And it sounds silly, but it was a hardcore belief for me then. And that helped justify my drinking, right? And imagine, I concocted tons of those kinds of stories and bought them all. Like I said, half your brain manufactures bullshit, the other half buys it. And I had to accept, because seeing things for what they really were was too much. Like, does not compute. Like I would have, it's like that head exploding emoji. That would have been me. And we all do it in different ways. Doesn't have to be big ways like that. It can be in just small sections, small portions of our life. Now, denial can show up in a few ways. It can show up in saying how busy you are or overworking. It can be procrastination or putting things off until such and such a time. Like, one day. Another thing that we do, and I know this was me, and I just said it now, is I know. You know the I know people? I do. I was one of them, and I still do it today in some ways. I know. And the problem with the I knows is that you're not closing the knowing doing gap. Another thing we do is blame others or whatnot for our circumstances. Again, that victim mindset. Or we reason everything away. And then we just have the classic closed mind. And the woman that I talked in the kitchen nightmares, anyone that approached her, including Gorsh, she flipped them the bird and told them to F off. Like that was her response to everything. So she definitely was a closed mind, right? In spite of the overwhelming evidence of that restaurant being a disaster. Now, you may be in denial if you continue doing the very thing that causes negative consequences, right? Or you may justify or minimize those things. My denial got so bad, it drifted into gaslighting, and that happens as well. And I'm not proud of that at all. But, I definitely tried to manipulate everyone else around me and twist their own perceptions of reality to match mine. And it was awful. It was awful. And it just goes to show you how far we will go to stick to the plot that we've created in our own heads. All right, enough yap. Let's do something here for a moment. So just settle in, have a sip of coffee, have a sip of your seltzer. I never use that word. I use bubbly water. It's isn't it more fun? Isn't it funner, funny? Fun? Anyway, let's do this. And I want you to be honest here. It's a safe place. It's a safe space. Let's be honest. And you can pause this or come back to it as you ponder what I'm going to ask. What's something right now that you just know in your heart of hearts that you're bullshitting yourself with? Like, what is that thing? And it may have already popped into your head. If something just immediately popped in your head, go with that. So I invite you to take a moment to put that thing in your mind, keep it in your mind, or jot it down. Maybe even jot it down. Because when we come back, I want to share how you can move past that thing you may be denying. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but even shedding some light on it might lessen or reduce the impact it's having on your life. So settle in. We're going to get right to it. All right, welcome back. I have my little sippy cup here. Stuff. You know what? During these breaks, you might think, oh, he just cuts, and I may do that sometimes, but actually there are times I do take a break for a few minutes just to soothe my voice, just to, sometimes a bathroom break or whatever. On this break, I was thinking about what came to me kind of in real time was thinking about this denial thing. And I remember, memory unlocked, I remember just deep in my drinking and deep in my denial, and the consequences were piling hard. And I remember being hands and knees on the floor, just a hot mess, just a mess. And I was beating my fist on the floor and saying, why is it that I always have to change? Why can't other people change? And it's kind of embarrassing as I relay that. But there it is. Therefore, the grace of God go I. But it showed just how powerful denial can be. Like, it was the whole idea is that there's no way in hell I'm the problem. But clearly I was. And to this day, I can think everything is all copacetic. But like everyone else, I know deep down, it isn't always, right? We all have those areas in our lives. And like I said earlier, they can be small or they can be life-altering. But we can show denial, or we can express denial, or just be in denial with those things. So, all right, so let's get back to your thing. Let's stay above board. Stay above board, guys. Okay, so remember that thing before the break that came to your mind, or that you put some thought into and you've put it on paper. It's the thing that you may be in denial about. Now, I know you might be saying, Paul, how can I know about the thing that I'm in denial about? Isn't that the point? Isn't that the whole thing of denial? Isn't that like its MO? And you're right in many ways. Like, if you're deep in denial, it may not reveal itself yet. Yet being the key word. But look back, think about those things I mentioned about procrastinating, too busy, etc., etc. Look at the ways that we deny truths. Like maybe use that as a clue. What things are you using? Like what things are you saying that about? Or what are you procrastinating about? What are you telling people you're overworked about or over busy, etc., etc. Also, here's another clue. Think about what others might be saying to you, right? And maybe you're telling them to piss off or whatever, right? Like that woman told Ramsey. Think about the things that maybe bother you when you're trying to go to sleep at night. That little niggle, that little thing that's niggling in the back of your brain. Eventually, things that you're in denial about will reveal themselves. They will. It's like stuff that slowly bubbles to the surface. You might have an inkling of it, but it's okay. Just whatever the thing you have, let's go through it. I have 7 things I want to share with you. So, first thing to overcome the denial is name the fear. All denial has a fear behind it, or several. What is it that you're so afraid of? So, for example, if you deny that someone, let's say in your company, is stealing from you, the fear may be that you may have to have a tough conversation, and that may come down to the fear of not being liked. And that can come down then to the fear of rejection, and so on and so on. So, what is the fear that you have behind that thing that you may be in denial about? The second thing is, how does that make you feel? I know, very therapy, right? Very coachy too. That is, what is it that your denial, like what is it costing you emotionally? Are you feeling worn down all the time? Are you cranky often? Are you feeling down or heartbroken or pissed off? What are the emotions that come up with the thing that you're tap dancing around? So again, that's something you can just jot down. Third thing, consider the consequences of not taking action on it. Like list the things that have already happened and what may happen if you continue, living in your own little la-la land with that thing. It could be maybe a broken relationship, or it could be financial issues, could be health problems, could be maybe dents in your mental health. Could be a tarnished reputation. Make note of these. Again, just take it objectively, like inventorize it. 4, what is the belief that you hold that enables your denial? So take a look at everything you've written down so far. Take it in, homie. Just take it in. Absorb. And what's the core belief that ties all these things together? Like, what is it that's holding those together? So maybe you believe that you're unworthy of love, or that you're not a strong person, or that good is good enough. That last one is one of mine, by the way. Then I want you to write out the opposite belief. What's a belief that can challenge your old one? What's something that can flip the script? And I want you to start shifting your belief to the new one, even starting today. And by that, I mean repeat it. Repeat the new one. Write it down where you can see it. Put it as a screensaver on your phone, whatever it takes. Because the idea now is to see, if you take something and remove it, you want to fill it, replace it with something else. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so this goes with habits. If you take an old habit out, you want to replace it with something new. And in this case, an old belief, if there's nothing there, you're going to naturally fill that with the old belief. So get the new belief, write it down, keep it somewhere, post-it notes, whatever. Say it often as you can. Look at it. Start to just feel it more. 5, talk to someone. Okay, so this is about getting perspective, right? Someone that can help you see things differently. So this can be a good friend. It can be a therapist. It could be a coach. Coach me. Just kidding. Or someone that you trust and has your best interests at heart. And they may be able to point out things you don't see. We all have blind spots. We all have them. So share with this person that you trust what it is you want to shift, and they may have some additional information, maybe a little tough love, whatever, to help you get going in the right direction and dealing with it. 6, Journal and meditate. I know you hear this everywhere. I know gratitude, blah blah blah. Everyone says it for a reason. It's just, those are great ways to start to integrate the new belief into your mind, also like into your subconscious, right? And it can also open up more things for you. Again, it's all about information. Maybe in your journal, write out how you want to show up. Write out, how it would be like to not be in denial of that thing, and how it would feel like to work through that. Like just allow yourself to brainstorm, to meditate, to tap into what your heart says, and see what comes from that. If you're just, again, this is now opening. Remember, it's the opposite of denial. So this may take some time. If you've not done this before, just start very slowly. 2 minutes meditation, 30 seconds. That's what I started. And just see what comes up. And lastly, set a goal and start taking action towards it. So if, let's say again, if you're dealing with that person who may be stealing from your company, your goal may be to have a conversation with them the next day, like something that's actionable and something that you can move on quickly. Because if you just wait, you're just going to go back to your old ways. But maybe for, the bigger goal for that person might be to create systems in place to avoid further problems. Whoever it is may want to look at their part in it. Like maybe they're not paying enough, or are you not vetting potential new employees, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what are your standards, such and such? What actions will you take to shore up your energetic leaks? And all this will take some time and patience and grace. Some of the things that you're holding on to have been around forever. Others maybe are fairly new. So especially for the ones that are older, be kind to yourself, right? But also challenge yourself. Because remember those two paths. You can either overcome it or you never do anything about it. It's your choice whether you want freedom and ease or just more pain and consequence. And believe me, I kept going down that bloody elevator until it was so in my face, I could not deny it anymore. And that's where those little cracks opened up for me. I don't want you to have to go down all the way to the bottom, the depths of hell. You can step off that elevator anytime. And when you can put your ego aside and see things objectively, then you can start to make the changes you want, because there's freedom on the other side of that. And when you look at your life right now and the ways that you do things, I have one question for you. Are you happy with that? He asked that question. By the way, speaking of Gordon Ramsay, I met him, and I'm not doing this name dropping. I did meet him, and he's a lovely guy. And one thing I love about him, and I've watched so many of his shows, and see, it's not that he's perfect and infallible, but I'm telling you, every time he's barking at someone, I mean, he goes over the top for sure, but he's always right. Like, I have yet to go, oh, Gord, like, well, maybe once in a blue moon, he might say something like, dude, I don't know. I don't agree with that. But he's spot on. The guy knows his stuff. And that's why, people, they can fight him, but the reality is he knows his stuff. And no doubt he's had to work on his own things too. We all do. Like I said, no one's perfect. So I hope this helps in some way in overcoming something that you might be stuck on. So thanks for being here, as always. And please, let's get those subs back on track. It's been kind of quiet lately, a few weeks here on the Seared podcast, on the growth front. I know it's my job to rattle the bushes and get more exposure and stuff like that. And that's in the plans. But anything you can do to help would be ever so nice. Oh my gosh. Subscribe, share, comment, like, review, wherever you watch or listen to this. And yeah, not going to deny it. It would be super helpful if you can help out in any way. Thank you. And with that, kitchen's closed. Now scram.